From analog.
Hi, Jim. You've a great signal up here. You're 5.9 plus.
You're digital.
We are everywhere you want to be. This is the CQ Blind Hams Podcast.
W2MGF. Kilo Charlie 2 Delta Juliet. You're loud and clear.
Hello, everyone. I'm Robert, November Charlie 5 Romeo, and welcome to another CQ Blind Hams podcast. That little snippet of radio traffic that you heard at the beginning was coming from D-Star. D-Star is the topic that we're going to be talking about in this podcast today. Now, this is at least the second podcast that's been done for the CQ Blind Hams podcast feed about D-Star. Chris Miller did an early podcast, number 14 as a matter of fact, about using D-Star with the THD74 Kenwood, which is the predecessor to the THD75, which I'll be featuring in this podcast today. I decided to do another one because I set my D-Star system up differently from the way Chris did it in podcast 14. Chris used what I think of as a more traditional way to work with D-Star, where he put different D-Star functions in separate memory channels. So he had a memory channel that would unlink from a reflector, another one that would link to a reflector, another one that would let you talk on a reflector, and another one that would allow you to test your signal between your hotspot and your radio by using an echo feature, which is similar to the parrot feature that we know about on All-Star. Anyway, this is a very viable way to configure D-Star, but it's not the way that I decided to do it on the THD75 for a couple different reasons, which we'll get into a little bit later in more detail as we actually go out into the weeds of how all this actually works on the THD75. Nonetheless, I used to think that D-Star was too complicated for me. I used to think that it sounded too digital for me to be very interested in it. It is a digital mode. People do sound digital on D-Star, but I've been pleasantly surprised at how good a lot of the audio quality is, compared at least to how bad I was afraid it was going to be. It doesn't sound like All-Star, and there's no point in pretending that it does, but what I've come to realize is there are some great people on D-Star. I've enjoyed making contacts with them, and making some new friends, for me at least, has been worth putting up with the digital sounding signal, which, as you heard from that original little snippet that I just pulled from a D-Star reflector, the quality isn't terrible. It's not fantastic, but it's listenable, at least for me. It may not be for everyone. What is D-Star? Well, it's a digital mode, one of the earlier digital modes. It was developed in Japan. The word D-Star is interesting. It's actually an acronym which stands for Digital Smart Technology for Amateur Radio. That's where the term D-Star came from. It, like all the other digital modes, has its own set of terminology. It has its own way of operation. In D-Star, you use something called reflectors and D-Star repeaters, and you link to and unlink from reflectors and repeaters, and so forth and so on. So there's a bit of a learning curve to understand exactly what D-Star is and how it works. But it's a particularly exciting mode because it allows you to work with both voice and data if you choose to. You can even use D-Star to transmit photos if you choose to do that. And the other part that is really quite interesting about it is that you can use a hotspot like what I'm using, which is an OpenSpot 4 Pro, to connect to both D-Star reflectors. And a reflector is nothing more than a digital gathering place or a digital address where you can go to via the D-Star network and meet up with other people who are also gathered in that particular digital room at that particular D-Star address. That's what a reflector is. Now, a repeater is also a place where people can gather on D-Star, but a repeater is something that you can connect to directly over the air without having to involve a hotspot. If you have a D-Star repeater nearby, you might choose to connect directly to it, just like you would connect directly to a nearby analog repeater, and you don't have to go through a hotspot. I, however, prefer using my hotspot as my own personal D-Star repeater, even if I'm going to connect to a local repeater or a repeater around the world anywhere. I can still use my hotspot to make that connection. So that's some of what I'm going to be demonstrating today, along with how to change from one reflector to another. There are at least 4 ways that I can think of that can be done using a hotspot with D-Star. And I'll also be showing you a little bit about how you can cross mode with a hotspot, say from D-Star to DMR. So you can use your D-Star radio, for example, to connect to the Brandmeister network or the TGIF network on DMR and still enjoy the functionality of the D-Star radio. You, of course, could use a separate DMR radio to connect to those DMR networks, but then you would need 2 radios to accomplish that task. For some of us, that's not a problem. A lot of us have 2 or 3 or 4 or more radios sitting around that can do these things. But if you want to just be able to use one radio and connect from D-Star to some of these other digital modes like DMR, it's perfectly reasonable to do that with a hotspot like the OpenSpot 4 Pro. So that's what this podcast is going to be about. Let's get on with how you do it. In this podcast, I'm not going to go through the step-by-step process of how to configure the THD75 to work with the OpenSpot 4 Pro. That's something that you can accomplish either by reading the documentation that comes with the Kenwood, especially including Chris Smart's accessible user guide and the documentation that comes with your hotspot. I can do a podcast later on the setting up process if people want that. But for now, I'm going to assume that you have things set up and working between your hotspot and your D-Star radio. So what we want to start thinking about is the fact that working in this way, essentially your hotspot, in my case the OpenSpot 4 Pro, is going to act as my D-Star repeater so that I don't have to use a repeater that I connect to over the air to access D-Star. I simply work with my hotspot to connect to whatever repeater or reflector I choose to connect to. So when you're using your OpenSpot or your hotspot as your D-Star repeater, you have to configure it in the radio as such. Now on the THD74, you had to add your hotspot into the repeater list for the radio. That's the D-Star repeater list. On the THD75, however, you don't have to do that because the 75 has a hotspot list or hotspot database specifically designed for you to enter the correct information for your hotspot so that it can act as a D-Star repeater. So once you have that configured, you have to put your radio in what's called DR mode, which is one of two digital modes that the radio can operate in. DR is digital repeater mode. There's also a DV mode, which is digital voice mode, which can also be used to connect to your hotspot. And it's really kind of a nice way to connect to the hotspot at first, just to make sure that everything is working. You can use DTMF tones, at least with the OpenSpot 4 Pro, to navigate to whatever reflector you want to go to on D-Star, and you can do that when you're in DV mode, digital voice mode. But to be able to take advantage of all the features that I'm going to be demonstrating and walking through here, you need to have the radio in DR, our digital repeater mode, and you need to be connected to your particular hotspot. So now that that has been done, we're going to walk through a menu on the radio, which is called the destination menu. And that's the place where we'll be doing most of our connecting to reflectors, changing reflectors, so forth and so on. So that's a particularly powerful menu option for the THD75. I'm going to start by showing you how to open up the destination menu, and then we'll go through how that menu works. So the way that I have D-Star configured on my radio and hotspot, the destination menu is really at the heart of everything that I do with D-Star. And to access the destination menu, you have to have the radio in digital mode, in DR, digital repeater mode, if you want to access all the options that I use. And of course, you have to have your hotspot set up acting as your digital repeater for D-Star. But the first thing I'm going to do is double check and make sure that my radio is set up the way that I need it to be, simply by tapping the power button.
A, DR, 2, unlink, reflector, from, repeater, direct, EL.
Okay, so what we got there is that we're on band A, and that our 2 field right now is set to unlink reflector. That was the last thing that I used, and I'll explain how you populate this 2 field in a few minutes. The from field is set to direct, which is telling me that it's using my OpenSpot 4 Pro as essentially the D-Star repeater, where my signal is coming from when I connect to another reflector or to another D-Star repeater. There are 2 ways that I can show you to get to the destination menu. The first way is the long way. You can press the function key on the THD75 followed by the mode button, and that will cause you to open up a digital menu. Let's do that right now.
Function. Digital function menu 1, destination, select.
So we're at the digital function menu with our destination as the first option. that would be our first menu option here. It happens to be number 1 on this menu. Just to show you briefly what's on this menu, just so you know, I'll quickly go through it.
2. Root. Select. 3. Repeater. Detail. 4. TX. Setting. 5. DV/DR. Select. 6. Data. Board. 7. TX. History. 8. DR. Scan. 9. Auto. Reply. 1. Destination. Select.
An item that's of particular interest there is item number 5, which lets you toggle between DR, digital repeater mode, and DV, digital voice mode. Okay, so we're going to exit out of this digital function menu, and I'm going to show you the other way to get to the destination menu. And that is simply to press and hold the up arrow key on the THD75. That's a shortcut key that will take us straight to the destination menu.
Destination. Select. Reflector.
So now we are in the destination menu, and we're sitting on select reflector, which is one of our choices here. I'll go through the choices in this menu, and then we'll come back and work with some of them.
Individual. Gateway CQ. Local CQ. Call history. Direct input. EMR.
So those are your choices on the destination menu. Let's go back to the reflector submenu and see what's in there.
Direct input. Call history. Reflector. Unlink reflector. Link to reflector. Use reflector. Reflector information. Echo test.
Those are the choices that are in your reflector menu, and essentially those are the same items that Chris Miller was using separate memory channels for in his CQ Blind Hams podcast 14. So, just for grins, why don't we try the item in this menu that says Echo? Right now I'm not linked to any D-Star reflector, but I can use the Echo item to check and see if my signal is being transmitted to and from my OpenSpot 4 Pro. So I'll go down to the Echo item.
Echo test.
We're on the Echo test. I will press the Enter key to activate that. And then I'll tap the push to talk. And we'll see if something is being echoed back. NC5R testing.
NC5R testing.
OPENSPOT.
So you can hear that my test transmission came back to me from my OpenSpot. So the echo test is working between my radio and my OpenSpot. Let's go back into the destination menu.
Destination. Select reflector.
Why not go back into the reflector menu?
Echo test.
We're still on the echo test. Let's try something else.
Unlink reflector. Link to reflector.
So let's say we want to use this link to reflector item to connect to one of the very popular D-Star reflectors. So I'll press Enter on Link to Reflector.
Link to reflector. REF001 Charlie link.
So the last reflector that I linked to from this menu item is a D-Star reflector called REF001 Charlie. And for anybody who's not familiar with D-Star, reflectors have a 3-letter designator at the beginning, things like REF, DCS, XLS, letters like that. They have a 3-digit in the middle, 001 in this case, and a module designator, which is designated with a letter, which in this case is the letter C or Charlie. So this is D star reflector REF 001 Charlie. That's what we're set to in this menu at the moment. I'm going to show you how to select a different reflector in a few minutes, but right now I'm just going to press enter on this one, tap the PTT, and we should connect to this reflector.
And for you, because
REF001 Charlie.
for this end. So, I'm going to leave it to the other guys. We'll get in touch, possibly tomorrow, Dave. I'll clear that.
So what we've got here is the reflector now active, and there's someone talking on it. And we can also hear that the open spot connected to it, because it told us that it connected to REF 001 Charlie. So that's essentially how that item works. Now I want to show you how you can use this link to reflector option in the destination menu to connect to a different reflector. So I'm going to go back into the destination menu and back to link to reflector.
Destination. Select reflector. Unlink reflector. Link to reflector.
Now I'm on the link to reflector option. I'm going to press enter on that.
Link to reflector. REF 001 Charlie. Link.
That's the one we just linked to. We don't want to link to that one again. We want to pick another one to link to. So the way I'm going to clear out the one that's in there now is by pressing the AB band button, which is the button on the THD75 above the function button.
Link to reflector. REF.
So now it's got just link to reflector REF, which is telling us that we can choose the type of reflector that we want to connect to. Right now it's set to REF. Let's see what our other choices are.
XLX. XRF. DCS. REF.
And now we're back to REF. So we'll connect to an REF reflector. So the way I choose REF is by pressing the right arrow, which moves me over to the next field in this set of options.
0.
And we're on 0. I could use my up and down arrow or my tuning knob to change the value here if I wanted to, but I want 0, so I'll leave it set to 0 and press the right arrow again.
0.
It's on 0 again for the next field, but I'm going to up arrow to 3.
1, 2, 3.
And now I'm going to right arrow again.
1.
It's showing 1 in the edit box now, but I'm going to down arrow to 0.
0.
So what I've set up so far is I want to connect to reflector REF 030. I'm going to right arrow one more time and choose the module letter designator,
Charlie.
which is set already, just so happens by default to Charlie, or the letter C. So everything is set the way that I want it. So I'm just going to press enter, and I'm going to tap the PTT button to connect to this reflector.
Open spot connected to REF030 Charlie.
OPENSPOT.
So that tells us that our open spot is now connected to reflector REF030 Charlie. Now, I'm not quite ready to use this reflector. I could listen to it the way things are at the moment.
KG5NDK.
As you can see, someone just keyed up and the radio announced their call sign when they unkeyed. So I'm able to listen to what's on the reflector, but I can't actually transmit on the reflector until I go back into the destination menu and set the option in the to field, which is right now set to link to reflector. If I press the push to talk, it would just try every time I pressed it over and over to link to REF030 Charlie, which is already linked to. So I'm going to have to go into the destination menu and choose use reflector before I can actually transmit. So let's go to the destination menu.
Destination. Select reflector.
Go into the reflector options.
Link to reflector.
Go up to use reflector.
Use reflector.
Press enter on it. Now that is selected. So now I would be able to transmit on REF030 Charlie, or REF30 Charlie, as D-Star people tend to call it. So that's one way to select a reflector and change to it. But there are other ways that you can change reflectors with the open spot. And the second way that I will show you is to use a DTMF sequence to change to a reflector. So let's say that I want to change from 30 Charlie back to 001 Charlie, but I don't want to go through the operation that I did before where I went to the link to reflector menu and entered the information manually into the various fields that allowed me to change to 30 Charlie. Instead, I would just like to enter a series of DTMF tones that the open spot would know how to interpret and would change me to the reflector REF001 Charlie. So the way I'm going to do that is I've got some DTMF sequences programmed into my radio using the DTMF menu, and I'm going to select the sequence that I have programmed in there that causes the open spot to go to REF001 Charlie. And that sequence, for all practical purposes, that's in my DTMF memory is a star, which in DTMF language represents the type reflector, which is REF, and then the numbers 001, and then the letter C for the module designator, which is Charlie in this case. So let's see if we can connect back to REF001 Charlie.
Open spot connected to REF001 Charlie.
OPENSPOT.
So now we're back on REF001 Charlie. There are some other things that you can do with DTMF tones with the open spot. And just to give you a couple more examples, you can press a DTMF tone B and the open spot will tell you its IP address. You can press DTMF C and the open spot will tell you its battery status. And you can press DTMF D and the open spot will tell you which reflector it's connected to. You can get that same information by going to reflector information, which you may remember is one of the options in the destination menu. But you can also use a DTMF tone to get there. That's just some examples of how you can use DTMF with the OpenSpot 4 Pro at least and the THD75 to do things with reflectors and to change profiles and so forth. So I'm going to move on now to showing you yet another way to change reflectors. This one will involve a little more explanation so you can understand how I set it up. When I was going through the destination menu, if you were listening carefully, and if you have a really good memory, you heard an option called individual. The individual submenu provides another way that you can connect to reflectors, DMR talk groups, D-star repeaters, and so forth. The way that you do this is you set up something in menu 220, which is called the call sign list. The call sign list allows you to fill in a name and then a call sign field, which is a little bit of a misnomer. You don't have to put an actual call sign in there. You can put a reflector address, for example, or the call sign of a repeater and a letter designation in the string that causes the OpenSpot 4 Pro to connect to that repeater or to link to that reflector, or to unlink from a reflector for that matter, if that's what you want to do. Anyway, you can set these items up in this call sign database at menu 220. It's fairly straightforward to figure out how to enter this information. Once you have some of these items entered into this call sign database, then you actually use the individual item, which is a submenu again of the destination menu, to access these items. So let's go take a look at some of what I have set up in my individual menu.
Destination. Select reflector. Individual. REF001 Charlie Link 1 CHARLEY. REF030 Charlie Link 30 CHARLEY.
So there are two old friends we've been working with, 001 Charlie and REF030 Charlie. Those are filled in as items to be linked to, so I could press return or enter on either one of those items. I was just arrowing down through the menu of choices. I could press enter on either one of those and then tap the PTT, and the hotspot would go link to those reflectors. Now we've got a couple of DMR Brandmeister talk groups that I've put in here. I'll arrow through those.
91 WORLD BM 3100 NORTH BM.
So a couple Brandmeister talk groups which I can access if I want to cross mode from D star to DMR.
4000 UNLINKTG.
So this item 4000 is in there, allowing me to unlink from any DMR talk group that I might be connected to.
DCS 002 Sierra Link NORBERT.
So there, my old friend Norbert, HB9FUV, has a reflector that he often uses in Switzerland. And he and I have gotten together on that reflector. So that's what you just heard, was the address for the reflector and the name Norbert spelled out, which lets me know that that reflector is the one that I typically talk to Norbert on if I'm trying to find him on D-Star.
KI5MMCBBRYAN.
The next one is a local D-Star repeater, which is located in a community neighboring mine here called Bryan. You may have heard it spell out BRYAN. That's for the town of Bryan, Texas, which is where this repeater is located. So by pressing enter on this one and tapping the PTT, my hotspot would go and connect to my local D-Star repeater in Bryan. Now, the reason that I use my open spot instead of connecting directly to my local repeater is because I only have to use, a quarter of a watt to reach my open spot, whereas the repeater, which is 9 or 10 miles away from me, I might be able to hit it directly, but it would take 5 watts and I might need to step outside, and it might be not a great signal from me to the repeater. So it works way better to just use my open spot to connect to any D-Star reflector or any D-Star repeater that I might want to connect to.
REF 001 Charlie Link 1 CH.
So now we're back around to REF 001 Charlie, which shows that these are the only items that I currently have in my call sign database list, which I get to again from this individual item on the destination menu. So that's how that works. Now I'm going to show you one final way to change reflectors inside this destination menu. I'm going to show you one more way to change to a reflector or connect to a reflector. That's using an item in the destination menu called direct entry. I'm going to show you how you would do that.
Destination, select reflector. Call history, direct input.
So now I've pressed enter on the direct input item, and it's ready for me to directly enter information. So I'm going to enter the information for the reflector that I used to talk to Norbert on in Switzerland. I think the reflector maybe is actually in Germany. Anyway, the reflector address is Delta Charlie Sierra 002 Sierra, DCS 002S. That's what I need to enter, followed by the letter L, which tells the hotspot to link to that particular reflector. And the way that you do the direct entry on the THD75 in an edit field like this is by using the keypad as if it were a touch-tone phone that allowed you to do the old T9 entry of pressing a certain letter X number of times to get to a particular letter on the telephone keypad. Press 2 once for A, twice for B, 3 times for C, and so on. So I'm going to go through the process of entering DCS002S on the keypad.
D A B C P Q R S blank 0 blank 0 A B C 2 P Q R S J K L.
So I should have the information entered now. I'm going to use the left arrow to left arrow back to the beginning of the string and make sure the string is correct.
S2 0 0 S C D.
So now I'm on the D. The thing you don't want to do is left arrow past the first character, because if you do that, that will exit you out of the string. But now I'm on the D.
C S 0 0 2 S L.
So I have the information entered correctly into this field. So now I'm simply going to press enter and tap the PTT and see if we connect to Norbert's reflector in Germany.
Open spot connected to DCS002 Sierra.
OPENSPOT.
So now we're connected to the reflector in Germany. I would simply, at this point, need to go back into the destination menu to reflector and choose select reflector before I could transmit on this menu, because right now my to field is still populated with this reflector address and the send or link to item with the L there. So it would just keep linking to this reflector over and over if I didn't go and change how that to field is populated to cause it to use the reflector as opposed to keep attempting to try to connect to the reflector. So those are some of the ways that I have found to connect to reflectors. I'm going to show you now how I could go about connecting to my local repeater. Of course, I could simply go to the individual item under the destination menu, locate my local repeater from there, because I've already entered it into my list of call signs. So I would simply go there and find it and connect if I wanted to. But I'm going to show you how I could connect to it using a different item in the destination menu called Gateway. So let's give that a try. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to go to the destination menu, and I'm going to go to Gateway CQ, and I'm going to walk through how I would narrow down to my local call area and then to my local repeater. So let's do that.
Destination. Select. Direct. Input. Call. History. Reflector. Individual. Gateway CQ.
Here we are at Gateway CQ.
Continent. Select. North America.
Select my continent,
Country. Select. USA.
my country.
Group. Select. W5.
Select my group, which is W5.
Repeater. Select. KI5MMCB.
Now, the repeater that's selected, it happens to be my local repeater. If it wouldn't have come up with that one, I'm sure it did come up with it because I have done this before, but if it could have landed on a different repeater in this W5 call area, and I would have had to up and down arrow through the list to find my local repeater. For example, if I arrow down, I'll go to a different repeater.
W5ACB.
So that's W5AC, which is also another repeater in my area that's associated with Texas A&M University. But I'll go back up to the one that I normally connect to that my local radio club uses.
KI5MMCB.
And it said the call sign KI5MMC, and then the letter B, which is telling the hotspot that this repeater is on the 70 centimeter band. So I'm going to simply press enter on this repeater and tap the PTT, and the hotspot should connect to this repeater.
Open spot connected to KI5MMC Bravo.
OPENSPOT.
So now I'm on my local repeater here in Bryan, Texas. Again, I would need to switch the to field to use reflector. Let me do that.
Destination. Select. Gateway CQ. Individual. Reflector. Unlink. Reflector. Link to. Use reflector.
Now that I've changed the to field, I could actually use this reflector. This repeater doesn't have very much traffic on it, but I'll give a shout and see if anyone should happen to come back to me just to see if we can demonstrate that it works. This is November Charlie 5 Romeo on the Bryan D-Star repeater. Just wonder if anyone happens to be around this afternoon. Nothing heard. NC5R clear. So, nothing heard on our local repeater, which isn't surprising. Unfortunately, like so many repeaters these days, it just isn't very busy. But what has been surprising to me is how busy the D-Star reflectors are, a lot of them, the popular ones especially. 030 Charlie, 001 Charlie. There are almost always people on these reflectors, day or night. And I've had a lot of fun getting to know new people and talking with people that I would have never have gotten to meet had I not gotten on D-Star. So just for grins, Let's go back to REF001 Charlie and see if anybody happens to be around here in the middle of the afternoon. So I'm going to go back to the destination menu.
Destination. Select. Reflector. Individual. REF001 Charlie. Link 1 CHARLEY.
Open spot connected to REF001 Charlie.
OPENSPOT. Destination. Select. Individual. Reflector. Use reflector.
It's November Charlie 5 Romeo on 1 Charlie. Anybody around this afternoon?
DL1BJW.
DL1BJW. November Charlie 5 Romeo calling. Good afternoon from Texas.
NC5.
Battery 0.
This is Delta Lima 1 Bravo Juliet Whiskey. Very good afternoon, very good evening from my side here. The name is Mike, like Mexico, India, Kilo Echo, the QTH, Northern Germany, about 100 miles west of Hamburg. Yeah, nice to meet you for the first time, I think, here on D-Star. My microphone back to you.
DL.
Yeah, very nice to meet you as well, Mike, over near Hamburg. I'm going to make it real short because I just see my battery's down to 0 here. And I'll probably lose you if I don't stop talking. But thank you so much for coming back to my call. I'll get a new battery and we'll try again sometime. So sorry to make it so short, but 73 from Texas, NC5R. I'll be clear. Thanks for coming back to me.
NC5R, DL1BJW. Well, that's okay. No troubles about that. Okay, wishing you a very good afternoon, very good evening coming up, and hope to see you down the log once. So, this was DL1BJW. 73 is my friend.
DL1BJW.
What happened there was I shouted out and someone keyed up, and I have my radio set so that when somebody keys up, the radio will read out their call sign. So that read out Mike's call sign in Germany. I gave him a shout and he came back to me and we just had that brief conversation that you heard. So that gives you a little flavor for what it's like to go out on D-Star and make a contact. Pretty cool, huh? There is one final thing that I want to show you, and that is how to cross mode from D-Star over to Brandmeister DMR. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to issue a DTMF command directing my OpenSpot to change from profile 1, which is the D-Star profile, to profile 5, which is the D-Star to Brandmeister DMR setup. So I'm going to do that right now and see if it'll change over.
Open spot profile 5 ready.
OPENS.
Open spot connected to Brandmeister 3102.
OPENSPOT.
Okay, now I've got profile 5 connected and it's connected to Brandmeister. I'm now going to go back to the destination menu to individual and switch over to Talk Group 91, which is the worldwide talk group on Brandmeister.
Destination. Select. Reflector. Individual. 91WORLDBM.
So now we should be connected to Brandmeister, the worldwide talk group. I'm going to put out a call and see if anyone comes back. It's November Charlie 5 Romeo on Brandmeister Worldwide. Anybody have a copy?
Number Charlie 5 Romeo. This is Hotel America 3 Kilowatt Zulu calling. Hotel America 3 Kilowatt Zulu calling. Over.
HA3KZ.
HA3KZ. This is November Charlie 5 Romeo. The name is Robert. I'm in Texas. Thanks for coming back to my call.
I copy you clear and loud for nice signal here in Hungary, mid of the Europe. I'm living at the capital of Hungary, Budapest. Name of the city is Budapest. My name is Zulu Ocean, Lima, India. So, thank you, the short contact. I wish you all the best, and I hope we will meet again. November Charlie 5 Romeo, Hotel America 3 Kilowatt Zulu.
HA3KZ.
All right. Thank you very much for the comeback. Lovely to talk to you in Hungary. Have a good evening, and 73 from Texas. November Charlie 5 Romeo, now clear. So long.
And standing by for the call.
So, there you have it. I was cross-moding from D-Star to the Brandmeister Worldwide talk group, and you were able to see what that sounds like.
Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and visit www.blindhams.com.